Hey there, and welcome everybody. My name is Aidan Sheaf. I'm the Policy and Research Associate at America Succeeds. And for any of you who are not familiar with us, America Succeeds is a national nonprofit based in Denver, Colorado. And we are focused on helping education systems ensure that every student has the opportunity to develop the durable skills they need to be successful in the workforce. So we have a great conversation for you today that's going to focus on how states can build the infrastructure that helps to translate portrait of a graduate visions into real change in the classroom that actually supports opportunities for students to develop the skills and mindsets listed on their portrait. And this conversation builds on a 50-state policy scan conducted in late 2025 and early 2026 called Beyond the Portrait. So I first want to ground you in the findings from that project, and then my colleague Michael will come on to do the same for another research project that he led over the past 2 years, where we studied the practices that innovative schools from around the nation are using to create effective durable skills development. And then after that, we get into our guest conversation where we'll be joined by two state education leaders who have real experience driving this work. And they are Dr. Katie Jenner, Indiana's Secretary of Education, and Dr. Sydnee Dickson, the former state superintendent in Utah. So before we get there, I just want to set the stage. All right, so here's where the portrait movement stands in America today. 26 states have adopted a portrait of a graduate, a statewide portrait of a graduate vision, which represents, a real acknowledgement of the importance of these skills and a commitment near nationwide that durable skills are and should be a core feature of K-12 education. But adopting a portrait on its own doesn't create the actual change in schools and on the ground that leads to the development of these skills. Once a portrait has been adopted, that's when the truly consequential work begins. So what we found in our scan is that the skills development outcomes listed on these portraits only become a reality for students when the policies, the funding, the programs, and the incentives all reinforce one another to build a coherent system that allows for and helps to scale the experiences that build these skills. And so I'll give a couple examples of that coherence argument that we surfaced in the scan. First, if a state wants to move away from using the Carnegie unit as the core measure of student learning towards a competency-based system, they first need to pass a policy that allows for students to earn course credit through demonstrations of competency or mastery in a subject. However, simply permitting competency-based education doesn't actually ensure the implementation of it at scale. In order to support implementation, states can define the criteria for what counts as competence and provide guidance for how that competence can be determined or assessed in the classroom. Another example is states making the effort to expand applied learning opportunities that help to develop these durable skills. Applied learning opportunities are defined as work-based learning, CT pathways leading to industry-recognized credentials, and dual or concurrent enrollment in the scan. If a state wants to expand these learning experiences, they can incentivize student participation in them by allowing these experiences to count towards course credit or towards graduation pathways. However, once that incentive is in place, access to an expansion of these types of learning experiences is still largely dependent on states creating sustainable funding streams to support programs offering those experiences. So those are two examples of how simply permitting or allowing for a practice that helps to develop durable skills doesn't necessarily ensure the implementation of it. And states have the opportunity to create a coherent system that supports that implementation by going a step further. So the real question in creating durable skills development at the system level isn't whether a state has a portrait. The question is whether the state builds the infrastructure around it to make those portrait outcomes possible and sustainable. Okay, so let me quickly introduce you to the policy scan framework so the rest of the conversation can make sense. Our scan looked at 22 specific policy and leadership conditions across all 50 states, and we grouped them into 6 categories: portrait vision, the skills vision statement itself, college and career readiness, which included conditions like requiring individual career and academic plans and reporting student outcome data beyond high school, applied learning opportunities that I mentioned before, like work-based learning, credential attainment through CTE pathways, and dual or concurrent enrollment, competency-based education, where we were studying the conditions related to flexibility provided by the states for districts to use measurements of learning that are dependent on competency or mastery rather than seat time. Graduation requirements, which included conditions like creating differentiated graduation pathways and requiring demonstrations of durable skills to graduate. And accountability systems, which was focused largely on whether or not states incorporated college and career readiness metrics into school evaluation frameworks, and whether or not those metrics included measures of applied learning opportunities. So here's the important thing to understand about this scan. No state has all 22 conditions in place. We didn't find a perfect state where everyone's developing durable skills at a system-wide lens. That's not happening in America at the moment. What separates the states, however, that are making real progress towards that goal, towards the goal of translating their portrait vision to experiences in the classroom, is how they ensure these conditions work together and reinforce one another. So today we're going to zoom in on two of the categories that we focused on in the scan, and those categories are graduation requirements and accountability systems. And I want to be clear up front that these aren't necessarily the categories we're deeming to be most important or that we think every state should focus on first. They're simply the levers that the two states we're highlighting today, Indiana and Utah, have done really high quality work to put in place. And here's sort of the meat of the issue that we're discussing today. Indiana and Utah were both trying to answer the same or a very similar question, and that is, how do we make sure that the infrastructure of our education system actually leads to the student outcomes on our portrait of a graduate? The answer to that question is not just having a portrait in place. And they both answered this question with different approaches. Indiana went to work at the student level. They took durable skills and applied learning opportunities and built them directly into what every single student has to do and demonstrate in order to earn a diploma. Utah focused on the system level. They used an overhaul of their accountability system and the expansion of personalized competency-based learning around the state to ensure that skills development is visible, valued, and rewarded at the school and the district level. So one state changed what students are required to do in order to get through the K-12 education system. And the other state took the approach of changing how the system sees and rewards what schools are doing to reach those similar outcomes. So let's take a look at Indiana first. Indiana is one of only 7 states in the entire country that requires students to demonstrate durable skills in order to graduate from high school. So this was an extremely rare condition that we found in our scan in terms of state actually having it in place. And 2 of these 7 states who have this in place, it's not really in effect until I believe 2027 or 2028. So really Indiana is one of only 5 states that are currently doing this. In most states, durable skills are something that an innovative school or a great teacher might emphasize. But in Indiana, they are a condition of earning a diploma no matter where you go to school. And here's how that works in Indiana. First, students must still earn a traditional high school diploma. And it's important to recognize this, that a focus on intentionally teaching durable skills does not and should not replace the emphasis on building a strong academic knowledge foundation. America Succeeds always says that durable skills are the combination of how you use what you know and how you show up in the world. So largely, you still need to know a whole lot in order for the durable skills that you have to help you be successful. So it's important to acknowledge that. Second, demonstrate employability or durable skills. And the key word there really is demonstrate. Students in Indiana are required to show the development of these skills through project-based learning, service-based learning, or work-based learning before graduating. And this is important because studying collaboration or critical thinking or growth mindset or fortitude in the abstract does not lead to the development of those skills. Students are required to apply these skills to real work that they're doing, and that is where true durable skills development happens, when you're required to use what you know and shape how you show up in the world to create a positive outcome or to reach a goal. And third, in Indiana, students must demonstrate post-secondary ready competencies. And they do that through acquiring an industry-recognized credential, completing an apprenticeship, a CTE concentration pathway, or earning dual credits. So again, emphasizing these applied learning opportunities throughout their graduation framework. So I think two things are really important to recognize here. Importantly, Indiana intentionally embedded an element of personalization into their graduation requirements. I think you're going to hear Secretary Katie Jenner speak to this later. So students are allowed to choose one of the options that in each of these three categories in order to satisfy that category, aside from earning a high school diploma. So really, it's each of the second of the three. This allows students to shape their own durable and technical skills development instead of it being dictated by a teacher or a school. And this really helps students to build agency, which is critical. And another detail that I love, because it shows how Indiana intentionally built the conditions surrounding their portrait to connect and reinforce one another, is that in Indiana, work-based learning not only counts towards this graduation pathway, towards demonstrating employability skills, it also counts towards earning course credit. So the graduation requirement and the opportunity to earn course credit work coherently together. So the bottom line here is that because durable skills live inside the graduation requirement, every graduate in Indiana has the opportunity to practice, apply, and demonstrate these skills, not just the students who happen to land in the right school or have the right teacher. All right, so now let's throw it over to Utah. So in Utah, they took sort of a different path to answering this question of how do we create the infrastructure for portrait skills outcomes to become a reality for students. Instead of focusing on what students should be required to do in order to graduate, Utah focused on what their system pays attention to and rewards at the school and district level. So schools respond, we know that schools respond to how they're measured and what they're rewarded for. Utah built portrait-aligned outcomes into their accountability system to reflect that knowledge. Utah's accountability system values the expansion of applied learning through their post-secondary readiness indicator listed here, which counts things like concurrent enrollment and completing a CTE pathway towards a school's accountability rating. That means that Utah's formula rewards the experiences that help students develop and apply durable skills, not just test scores. The second piece that I want to focus on here is allowing schools and districts to include localized accountability indicators in their reporting. So Utah lets schools add up to 2 of these locally chosen indicators to their report cards. So a district that cares about work-based learning or capstone projects can add that to their accountability report and get recognized for it, both by the state and by any parents or community groups who may be paying attention. And while locally added indicators do not actually impact a school's accountability rating in Utah, this policy represents the state giving districts a way to surface and celebrate the practices they value. The third and final piece here is a focus on competency-based learning, where students can earn credit by demonstrating mastery or competency rather than logging seat time. In a moment, when I throw the mic over to my colleague, Michael, he's going to discuss the findings of our research practice collaborative, and he will explain why competency or mastery-based learning is such an important piece of any education system that really wants to deliver durable skills development effectively. And critically, Utah goes beyond just permitting competency-based education to occur. Utah has established supports like defining the specific criteria for competency that helps districts to actually implement these models to create more personalized pacing and deeper learning for students. So when your accountability formula and your credit rules reward portrait-aligned practices, schools are incentivized and have a real reason to do this important work. And now that I've highlighted some of the infrastructure these states have built to enable portrait-aligned learning, I want to pass it over to my colleague, Michael Crawford, to dig in deeper on the specific school level practices and conditions that we know lead to durable skills development. The floor is yours, Michael.
Wonderful. Well, here we go. Thanks, Aiden. You have walked us through the conditions that states can build, and what I'm excited to chat with you about today is what they unlock on the ground. So for the past 2 years, America Succeeds has led the Research Practice Collaborative. We studied 12 schools that develop durable skills exceptionally well, and we asked one main question: what is actually driving this durable skills development? And so in addition to developing durable skills, the beyond skills payoff is right here on the slide: agency, professional identity, informed vision. And so hang on to those, because I'll be referring back to them in a little bit. So first, the scope of this project. We worked with 12 schools across 9 states in conceivably every kind of setting, from urban, suburban, rural. We work with charters, career academies, public innovation schools, profession-based programs, and one traditional public school right there in Batesville, Indiana. And what we found is a pattern, not just a handful of lucky kind of random stories. And the most consistent driver across all 12, regardless of size, geography, budget, was the fact that they embraced authentic experience in real-world context with real stakes. Not simulations, not just lessons from a book, but rather the real thing, doing the work in real spaces. So, and underneath all that variety, these schools share one design, and we'll call it the architecture. So here it is, 3 separate layers that compose the architecture. So at the foundation, there are 3 principles. So first, make skills explicit and trackable so that students can name and monitor their own growth. Second, build authentic, consequential experiences, real work that matters beyond the classroom. So these could be interns, they could be self-directed learning projects, a range of different ways schools did this. And thirdly, to fully integrate the durable skills efforts within the full education system. So skills are woven into the work. They're not bolted on. They're part of rubrics, and there are posters on the wall, and they are woven into assessments. It's not just a one-off. On top of that, we found 4 amplifiers that make the whole experience of durable skills development even stronger. So these are progressive complexity, so starting a little bit more simply and building from there. Sustained relationships, the importance of mentors or advisors or folks who really know the students themselves. Structured reflection, that it's not just an add-on or it's not just for extra help, but instead it's built into their program. And attention to context, so different schools, different geographies, different student populations all need to take those features and factors into consideration. And ultimately, all of that, in addition to durable skills development, are aimed at the 3 kinds of outcomes that I flagged. Agency, which is the ability for young people to drive their own learning and lives. Professional identity, which refers to their sense of who they are as a professional person emerging into the world of work. And an informed vision of where they want to go, and maybe even where they don't want to go. All of those kinds of things were generated through the experiences that young people had at these schools. And here's the key. This architecture is what schools build, but it doesn't run on inspiration. It runs on the conditions that a state can put in place. And so let me walk you through the 6 conditions that Aiden mentioned that were part of Beyond the Portrait. And I'll run you through these from the school side. And so you can think of these 6 in a way as a sequence, as name it, plan toward it, do the real work, count it, require it, and reward it. So let's start right at the top. Number 1, portrait vision, name it. So every strong school starts with a clear community-owned picture of its graduate. Some get real specific and they spend a lot of time developing that portrait. Others, it is kind of given from the top down, but ultimately they embrace it. It's important that this portrait leads the way. At Batesville, that came from a 3-year process with parents and employers and educators and students. And it was not just a slogan, but instead it was a living framework that really drives curriculum, drives advising, and drives the choices that Batesville makes. And so for the state lever that they can embrace is when a state builds its own portrait and helps districts build theirs, it models the process for how to do that. It increases alignment between district and state, or school and state, and it raises the bar for what is possible at that school. Second, college and career readiness. Plan toward it. So at Cedar Falls CAPS in Cedar Falls, Iowa, students rotate through real teaching placements. So one came out able to say not just that she wanted to teach, but that she preferred general education over special education and younger grades over older grades, and why that was. Right? This is clarity that most adults never reach, or if they do, it often takes a lot further into their career for them to figure that out. And so the state lever here, a student plan is only as good as the real experiences behind it, and outcome data is how a state learns whether its graduates are actually landing where they want to land. 3, applied learning. So this is do the real work. This was our single most consistent finding in the RPC. Authentic experience with real stakes. That's what really matters. At GoCaps Monette, a career-based program, a profession-based learning program in Monette, Missouri, school happens inside hospitals and elementary schools and farms. So Macy, for example, earned her full EMT certification in high school and walked out fully career ready. And this is the, quote, build authentic experiences principle in policy form. And so for the state, funding that treats work-based learning as infrastructure and not enrichment, plus the supports that let every student reach it, not just the ones with a car and a free afternoon. It's important that everyone has access to these. 4, competency-based education. Count it. At Gibson Eck, for example, a dashboard of 20 competencies lets students watch their growth accumulate in real time. Their graduates persist in college about 17 points above the national average. And ultimately, here's why CBE matters for durable skills specifically. It pretty much takes seat time out of the equation. Right? Durable skills, in order for durable skills to develop, you need repetition. You can't read a book about collaboration and then walk out a great collaborator. You really have to do the actual work. And competency-based education is what makes the doing count. And so the state lever could include things like flexible time, credit by mastery, and ultimately clear state guidance so schools aren't inventing the rules just on their own alone. 5, graduation requirements. Require it. So at STEM School, Chattanooga, in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the whole graduation logic runs on 3 tenets: collaboration, critical thinking, and innovation. And you advance at that school by demonstrating growth over 4 years in those 3 tenets. And the skills, they are not extra. Instead, they are the path. They're the main vehicle for how that works. And back in Batesville, because work-based learning counts for credit, 100% of graduates leave with some college credit, and almost 1 in 4 finish a full associate's degree before they walk. And so what does this mean at the state level? When a state requires durable skills demonstration and lets real work count, a portrait becomes a graduation expectation. And 6, accountability systems. Reward it. Here's the catch that ties it all together. At the High School for Recording Arts in St. Paul, Minnesota, where 92% of students experience poverty, the school posts a 90% graduation rate and an 82% reduction in criminal justice contact among its graduates. And if you're really only focused on test scores, or a test score only system wouldn't really see those things. It might even penalize the school for not looking more conventional. And so the state lever, accountability that counts applied learning and that lets schools surface what they value, decides whether work like this gets copied or quietly ignored. So that's the architecture and the 6 conditions that let it reach every student instead of just the lucky few. And when these 6 work together, you get exactly what I asked you to hold at the start. You get agency, you get professional identity, you get informed vision, as well as the development of durable skills. And so students who direct their own lives, they see themselves as capable, and they choose a future based on what they've actually done, who they are, and what impact they want to make. So ultimately, it's not about having the most conditions, it's whether they reinforce each other. And you don't have to wait. Every state already lets real world learning instructional time, for example. There's space within your world, your work at the moment, that you can be flexible, you can adapt, and you can capitalize on what your state has to offer. And so these schools exist because people at the systems level created the conditions that allow them to exist and to thrive. So let me turn it back to Aiden and two leaders who have done exactly that.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate your overview of the school level conditions and practices that really lead to durable skills development. And we know that those things can come alive for all students across a state system when the strong state infrastructure is built to help scale those practices. And we're very lucky today to be joined by two people who helped to build exactly that kind of infrastructure in their states. So first, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Katie Jenner, Indiana's Secretary of Education. Dr. Jenner is Indiana's first Secretary of Education, responsible for implementing a unified vision spanning K-12 through higher education. Under her leadership, Indiana adopted new high school diploma requirements that let students personalize their pathway, and the state hit its highest graduation rate on record. Before this role, she was a high school teacher and a district leader, so she's done this work at every level. She's also a wife and a mother to twin daughters and currently lives in Madison, Indiana. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Jenner. I'm
Great
also
to be
thrilled
here.
to introduce
Thank you.
Dr. Sydnee Dickson, who is the former State Superintendent of Public Instruction in Utah, now a special advisor to the Dean of Strategic Initiatives at the University of Utah. Dr. Sydnee Dickson is an award-winning educator and Utah's former state superintendent with more than 4 decades working in education. As superintendent, she championed personalized competency-based learning and led Utah's Portrait of a Graduate framework creation, which is exactly the work we're here to chat about today. She now serves at the University of Utah and on the America Succeeds board. So we really appreciate you spending the time with us today, Sydnee, and offering your expertise to our organization broadly.
My pleasure.
In our conversation, we're going to dig into 3 main things, and those are going to be broadly how each of them got this work off the ground in their state, what implementation actually looks like at the school level, including the parts that have been more challenging than expected, and what they would say to a state leader who wants to do this but isn't sure where to start or what the best next step would be. And if you want to learn more about these issues or the way that they have solved these issues after this conversation, our full report, Beyond the Portrait, lays out the full scan framework and shows where every state stands. You can find that report on the research page of americasucceeds.org. Katie and Sydnee, thank you so much for being here. And let's start where it all began. So Sydnee, I'll have you take the floor first. Can you take us back to sort of the beginning of these efforts in Utah when you first started driving the work to create a portrait and support schools to implement portrait-aligned learning? So what were some of the main problems you were trying to solve, and why did you choose the approach that you did to solving those problems?
Thank you. And thanks everybody for having us on the call. We were not necessarily rudderless. We just had boats going in all different directions, trying to reach a destination. And I don't think as a state we were clear at our specific metrics that we were trying to reach. So we started with a solid strategic plan and held ourselves accountable as an agency for those 4 key areas that all had strategies, metrics, tactics, everything for us as a state agency. And the 4 main areas were around early learning, effective teachers and leaders, healthy, safe and healthy schools, and personalized learning. We wanted every student to have a very personalized experience that would not only meet their needs, but help them succeed and reach their goals. So in that space, in that quadrant, we needed both policy and funding around personalized competency-based learning. And we wanted a process for all of our districts and charters to engage in that would help them get there. So we really started with a strategic plan, mapping that out, going to our legislature and finding some key allies to help us promote the work. And we had grants established around competency-based learning. And we spent a good year with those who were chosen in planning, and then that second year in implementation with coaching. And the third year of the grant was to make sure that it was seamless and integrated with things that were going on at the LEA. So it was a really robust support system for kind of figuring out, what does this look like in a personalized way? What does it look like in context? And what resources will you continue to need to make this sustainable? And again, just trying to make everything seamless. Along the way from that, we developed a portrait of a graduate. Our state board kind of changes every couple of years. We have a 15-member partisan elected board, and we felt like we needed to continue to strengthen and tighten that rope from our base level of where we were and where we were trying to get to with all of our students' graduation rates and literacy and numeracy and post-secondary opportunities and all of the things. So we started down the road of a Porch for Graduate back in about 2019, 2020. And then, of course, that everything's kind of pre and post pandemic in my mind now. Katie, you probably feel the same way. So I'll talk more about the details, but we entered into our Portrait of a Graduate work pretty specifically in 2020 during the summer when we were all first online and developed competencies around that Portrait of a Graduate. So I'll get into the details, but that's the history of going from a strategic plan that we could get the entire education system, including our policies, together on, and then moving from there into these specific quadrants, one of which was personalized competency-based learning, and then to Portrait of a Graduate. One of the big threads through that, of course, a through line is always career and technical education. But I'll stop there and turn it to Katie because they're doing some amazing work in Indiana.
That's fantastic. And I love that you emphasized the importance of gathering key allies from around the state in the different sectors when you're talking about going from a strategic vision to actual changes on the ground, especially around personalized competency-based learning, which, at that time especially, had not taken hold in very many states around the nation. So I think that's really astute.
For sure. That was really key.
Yeah, great. All right, let's hand it over to Katie. Speak to some of the same things in Indiana.
Sure, glad to. Well, first of all, so excited to join my friend Sid. A lot of people wonder if we know each other across the country, and many of us know each other very well, right? Those of us who share notes. And when Sid was a state chief in Utah, we compared notes all the time and still compare notes in her new role. So again, so glad to see you, Sid. So, similar to what Sid shared, our profile of a graduate, which we call Indiana GPS, became our roadmap to what we were going to focus on in Indiana. And the timing was pretty impeccable. I came in January 21, and that was a time when we were doing everything as a country, right, to try to get our schools open or keep them open. But the morale was really questionable, not only for educators, but also for parents and families and students and other sectors. So the timing worked out well because we were able to step back and ask Indiana, like, what really matters to you? For all graduates in our state, no matter where they're from, Northern Indiana and Gary, Southern Indiana and Evansville, everywhere in between, what matters? And the key characteristics that came about, obviously academic mastery, Sid mentioned this too, reading, STEM, have to stay laser focused on that. Then the next is credentials and experiences. Credentials of value and experiential learning, work-based learning was really elevated by parents and families, business and industry. Many of them heard about some of these opportunities at the baseball field or at the grocery store, at church, from other families, and they'd compare notes. So there was a real energy around that. And then the rest were skills, communication and collaboration. And it's the little things. I mean, I think with cell phones, never has it been more difficult to teach students skills because their head's often buried in this, right? And it's with AI, knowledge in our fingertips, the skills are, I think, quickly becoming even more and more important. There's a human side to this. In addition, skills like work ethic, civic, financial, and digital literacy. That made up our characteristics. And something that Sid and I've talked about with other state leaders around the country is where people fall flat on this is if they try to boil the ocean and they have all the different skills a child might need. Because really, you've got to be very crystal clear about what you need, what are the most important. And the goal would be to figure out how to measure each of those, to understand where are we starting and where are we going. So that work right there, and again, I'm sure we'll get more into it, that was really the catalyst that just shot our rocket. We focused on that and removed barriers as quickly as possible. And we're rolling today in Indiana at a pretty, some would say pretty quick pace. For me, it's never moving fast enough, right? Pretty steady pace. We're moving.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. From our perspective, it's definitely been a very quick pace in Indiana and in Utah. So I commend you guys for that. And I also want to just notice that you guys both recognized the disruption of the pandemic as a time that sort of led to this ability for you to go in your state and sort of recenter everybody's focus on what is the purpose of education in our state, and to bring about change based on that. So I just think it's really interesting how, such a horrible and challenging time in all of America, and specifically for education, has led to some extremely important changes that have needed to happen for a long time. So thank you guys for taking advantage of that moment. Okay, yeah, next I want to get to some of the things that you guys alluded to. Like, let's get into the implementation of this all. Walk us through a couple of the key details and how you took this from the strategic vision down to real changes in the classroom. As as a state leader, you can't just flip the switch and have everything change overnight in schools. So I'm hoping you can be sort of honest and practical with our audience about the roadblocks you encountered, maybe what was more challenging than expected, and conversely, where things really went well and were smooth and easy to accomplish. So Dr. Jenner, let's keep it with you and speak to Indiana.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we all know what gets measured gets done. And when you think about that and going back to that, the key characteristics named in Indiana, academic mastery, we've been studying proficiency levels, growth levels for years. So that data is flowing to all of us as states. Credentials of value and experiences like work-based learning, we knew we had a gap. We had some data within our CTE space, some data that we got from higher education, but we knew we had work to do. And then, of course, that when you get to the skills, we wanted something a lot better than select A, B, C, D on a test. We know to measure skills, it's going to have to look different. And how do you do that at scale? So we were very honest with Indiana, like, hey, we can measure this, but we know this is important and we're going to work on it. We're going to figure it out. Our I think ability to implement, I share this so often, but it was really like an army of people that all put their hands in. And it was, it kind of incredible. We tried to identify at first, like, who are our key change agents across the state. Now we've gotten so granular that we could tell you who our key change agents are in every county and community in the state and what their cell phone numbers are. Because to scale at pace, you have to light the fire locally at the community level. So that was a real priority. And I say that because all the work that we've gotten done, it's not, just a small group of people doing it. It is truly a business and industry, especially at the table, higher education, K-12, philanthropy, parents and families, mayors, ... Yeah, I mean, I could go on for a while, Aiden, and Sid knows this as well. I mean, we've overhauled our diploma structure. We after we overhauled our diploma structure to yes include and call out knowledge and the skills that Indiana identified. We align that to our outcomes funding in K-12, so our funding formula is aligned, and then we recently just announced that our accountability is passed and signed and federally approved and all the things. And so our accountability model is now aligned to all of this. We have our diplomas as currency, so they have direct pathways and handoffs, automatic admission to every public college in Indiana, automatic apprenticeships. We still have work to do to add more apprenticeships, but we again have just an army of business and industry leaders around our state that have developed talent associations to help us build that system. So, I mean, I think we've gotten a lot done, but in so many ways, I feel like we're just getting started to show what's possible and what could be in the education space.
That's amazing. And yeah, I really, again, I think it's so important that you're emphasizing the fact that to ensure that a top-down initiative coming from the state level actually reaches the folks on the ground, you got to bring them in, right? You got to bring folks from business and from schools and the parents and the community leaders all in around the same issue. Because really, at the end of the day, we all want the same things for our kids, no matter what political beliefs you have, no matter where you live, no matter what you do in your life. Everyone just wants the next generation to be successful. And that starts with ensuring they have academic knowledge and the skills to use that academic knowledge. So Sydnee, can you speak to some of the same things then? What were some of the roadblocks and some of the ways that you brought the implementation of this portrait-aligned learning to the localities in Utah?
I'd be happy to. I first want to just say that Indiana they are on the road to awesome and down the track. I mean, I think we were pretty forward thinking in a lot of the elements of competency-based learning and first credential and our portrait of a graduate. But all those systems have to work together. And that's what I love so much about Indiana's work, is that while Katie and her team have been building these components, they've also been building the system. And if you look at the governance structure, Katie, you're now over all kind of K-20, right? And so the data elements that we could talk about in a minute, I think all the way that you've just looked at it as an entire system is really helping you accelerate. And I think that's one of the challenges I could talk about, is that when you have these disparate governance systems and things are not co-joined, then it can be a little tricky. I want to go back, and Katie mentioned this with their GPS system. One of the first things I started doing was talking about durable skills. And this is where America Succeeds comes in, because America Succeeds had already done some groundbreaking work. And I was able to take that work and say to everyone engaged in career and technical education pathways and apprenticeships and all of the things, look, we know what employers need. We also had industry experts at the table in all of our CTE pathways. I think we had about 13 distinct pathways. We had experts in advisory groups, and that's how we would shift our standards. We would listen to the field and then have our teachers teach according to what was needed. At the same time, there were these more generalized durable skills that people were talking about as soft skills, and it was making me crazy. They were sort of tucked to the side, and any chance I could take advantage of, I would say they are not soft skills. They're hard to engage kiddos in. They're hard to learn. And yet it's the number one thing that our employers say they need in our students that are coming to them. So we really got clear about what do durable skills look like. And then we created our map. We call it the Utah map. And it stands for mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And it was interesting talking about that purpose piece. So mastery, of course, all the things that we've already talked about, including civic literacy, financial literacy, digital literacy. Autonomy is where you get all those C's of communication, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, which is not a C, but you throw all of those things into kids being able to be autonomous learners and independent learners. And then purpose is really interesting because we feel like it is an opportunity and obligation to teach kids how to be civic minded, empathetic, service oriented, and find purpose in their lives and in school and in the work they're doing. So that map really was intentional in the naming, that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. We wanted everybody to engage in the process of creating their own map and calling it whatever they want. So we went out and started building capacity in our districts and charters. I'll give you a great example and a non-example. So we had a small community. There was a large pork producing element to the community. And we had farmers that came in after work, a lot of community members, the mayor, parents, students, and facilitated this great conversation around what would a map look like in your community. And they developed this lovely portrait of a graduate for their district. Contrast that with being asked to give a keynote at kind of a medium to large size district. And I was asked to lay out portrait of a graduate and to explain that to the audience of teachers and support staff, et cetera. There were probably, 4,000 people in the audience. And at the end of my remarks, the superintendent stood up and said, "We're going to adopt what Superintendent Dickson just said. And this is now our blank portrait of a graduate." So you had a district that did the work, and I watched it take root, and a district that didn't do the work. They just said, "That sounds good," and do what the state says without building capacity, and it didn't take root. So back to Katie's comments about how you have to be so systematic and help and support, it makes all the difference. I think the second thing, other than going out and helping facilitate and coach and mentor along the way, during the pandemic, I mentioned that during the summer, we had teachers come together and write competencies. So if you look on our Portrait of a Graduate website, you will see what would this particular durable skill look like in second grade mathematics. So we drill right down to the grade level and the content in teaching one of the skills in our portrait. And we found that to be important for our teachers because we sometimes assume, given everything that's on their plates, they can just naturally do all of this work. And they probably can, but why not save them time and energy in saying, here's some ideas for you. So we have curated resources along with curated resources for competency-based learning as well. So that's the second piece. But the third piece is really what Katie has done well, I think, and that's how do you link it all together and help your communities understand what's happening? I'll give you another non-example. We have a district who engaged in an awesome portrait of a learner for their district, and it's living and breathing, and they're using it. But they started long ago, before that POG came out of the portrait of a learner, with standards-based grading to test the waters. And they were kind of told, maybe you should make sure that it's really clear how that's part of the bigger picture. But families didn't understand it. And so it's something they weren't used to. And we've all been in and out of standards-based grading for a very long time. That's nothing new. But I watched my own community have a lot of angst and frustration because as parents, they didn't understand what was the bigger picture. What were they trying to accomplish? When I would explain it to my neighbors, they would say, that makes total sense. I love that. But that's not how it's being implemented, or that's not how I understood it. So making sure, again, looping back to what Katie said right at the beginning, getting everybody together, making sure families, students, educators, policymakers, our industry partners, everybody knows where we're going. They understand how we're getting there. And then they put their local context into play to make it work for them.
That was incredible. I think you just made the entire argument that that me and America Succeeds made in our 20-page report about this in about 3 minutes. So that was extremely helpful. Surfaced the entire theme of this conversation, which is it's the coherence that you can create in the system using the different levers that are available to states that is really what creates the change at the school and the classroom level. And it's not just the top-down initiatives. It's not just one, a one-off program or a one-off grant. It's how you bring all the pieces together to really create these experiences and these changes in practice that impact how the students experience school and how they go through the educational system. So I appreciate that. We could almost end it there, but I want to talk to you guys about about a few more things here. And we can I think this is a good place to sort of begin to wrap this up. You just surfaced the entire coherence argument that we really want to make here. And Sydnee, I'd love if you could now speak to any advice you would give to other state leaders who are, maybe in a similar situation that you were in a few years ago trying to implement this work, who maybe have hit a snag or roadblock around the way in terms of implementation. Like, what were the keys in creating that coherence that other state leaders could learn from your work in Utah?
Yeah, it's such an important question. I was reflecting back earlier today on how we got to where we are, and the latest initiative is First Credential. So every student will leave high school with a meaningful, usable credential. And Katie's already talked about it. Indiana's doing a great job. And by the way, a Utah team just visited Indiana to learn from them. But we started the First Credential work maybe 5 years ago, and we could not get people to buy in. And I realized, that's not quite accurate. We got people to buy in, but they were trying to figure out how does it link to everything else. And for us, it was just such a natural transition. We've done all of these things building to our students leaving with a credential that they can hand to somebody and say, this, like, I can get a job. I can go on to post-secondary. This high school diploma meant something. So I remember having the conversation years ago with policymakers sitting at a national conference for legislators and having a breakfast around this idea, and getting their peers to buy in was a little tricky. So you have to take people sometimes to places where it's working and help them feel and see this very visceral thing of how schools and systems can look different. So a couple of naysayers, we took them to a school called the Catalyst Center in Davis District, where students are engaged in amazing, hands-on, lovely CTE pathways. And one of them said, that would have saved me. My life would have been different had I had that experience. Or, my trajectory would have been easier rather than what it took me to get where I am today. So having them start to see how apprenticeships and how schools can look different and be different, all wrapped in a system of trying to get kids out of seat time and into, learning being the constant, and all these other things that we worry about, bus schedules and all this stuff. Those are variables, but the constant is learning, and getting people to land in that space together is really critical. How you go about that can look different in every state, but if you can enter into that conversation and start with policymakers, start with people that are going to be hard to convince, and help them feel like they really are on the ground floor, not just an ancillary that you're trying to convince is something that you've already done, but get them in right at the start when you're doing this work. That helped us a lot. It helped us get funding. It helped us get policy changes, and it's helped carry the momentum to where we are today, with now everybody leaning in and working on First Credential together.
I love that. And I think that point of bring skeptics along at the start can be applied to almost any issue in America, not just around creating educational reform. So I think that's
and Aidan, I just would emphasize making them authentic partners, because sometimes we spend time trying to convince people, and there are those that you will never convince. Don't spend a lot of energy there. That'll wear you out, right, Katie? So you have to find the willing coalition. Like, that is key. But if you can find a couple of people who might be skeptics and bring them into that willing coalition, without that willing coalition, you're just going to get stuck.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, and I think so many other state leaders from around the nation can heed that advice and use it in their own context. So pass it over to you now, Katie. Anything that you can add there, or any other pieces of advice that you would provide to some of your peer education secretaries?
So I'll just start by sharing, it is not easy to be a state education leader at a time such as this. And I recognize that everyone's context is very different. Some have, governors and general assemblies who are like full speed ahead. Others have some tricky points, but the urgency is real for every single state and for our country to make sure our students are ready and have the knowledge and have the skills. So a couple of things come to mind that I've certainly learned lessons along the way. And actually someone gave me a sign that hangs in my office right where I sit, and it says, "Don't let the perfect get in the way of the good."
Mm-hmm.
I see so many leaders not get it done because they're waiting for the perfect time, the perfect proposal, the perfect whatever. And there is just no perfect time. I mean, we overhauled our diplomas in a gubernatorial election season, which I would not recommend, but it worked out. So you have to move when you can. All leaders change, and so you only have a window of opportunity. You have to move at pace. So the other thing that really goes to as well, in some states, and I appreciate when Utah visited, and Sid and I talked about this, Utah really is talking about building a system, not just random acts of tactics. So it can't be, we're going to just do a profile of a graduate, or we're going to just overhaul diplomas, or we're just going to have an accountability model that includes these indicators, or we're just going to, look at some of our dual credit, dual enrollment coursework. I mean, it is a full look at all of, K-12 and higher education and workforce. And that leads really to, my third and final point that I think Sid shared as well. Who you surround yourself with is essential. And you only have so much time, and you better spend your time on the people who are the change agents, are the doers, can set the example to really move the needle, because there will always be a line of naysayers. But the second that you have the change agents who are doing it, then you don't have to defend it to the naysayers. You can just point to the people who are doing it and the kids and families who are seeing the impact. And that truly shared early, and I can't emphasize this enough, our communities have led this work. The state, we've gotten stuff out of the way, but we've built an army of people who are driving it, and they're calling us and saying, put this on your to-do list, add this piece. This is what we need out of the way next. And I know I said that my third and final, but there's one more thing that has been very helpful. In roles like this, where you're setting administrative guidance, administrative policy, you can get tripped up pretty quickly because, again, change is tough. But one thing that has been helpful is our General Assembly. We have worked very closely with them to put what we want in statute. So the Secretary of Education shall overhaul Indiana high school diplomas by December 31st of this year. Secretary of Education shall build a qualifications framework extending from K-12 through higher education into the workforce by this date. So you can see Indiana's game plan and system building following every single legislative session. So this coming legislative session that starts in January is a budget year. We are about to, I think, probably double, if not triple down on the work that we're doing with what we have ahead. And they will strategically set timelines for me so that I'm not all on my own driving this. I can point to that statute that says I don't want to be in orange for the rest of my life. I'm not breaking this law. So let's figure it out together. That was helpful too. So thank you for your questions. And Sid, I always love listening and learning from you. So again, appreciate the time today.
Right back at you, Katie Jenner. You're one of my sheroes.
Oh, thank you.
That was fantastic. And this has been a wonderful conversation overall. So appreciative to you both for spending the time with us today and providing such actionable insights for other states who are doing this work, and for making America Succeeds argument for us. I didn't have to fill in any gaps. Even though you guys both took sort of a slightly different approach in your state to driving portrait-aligned learning into the ground, you both clearly articulated the importance of creating a coherent set of enabling conditions, whether that's policy and state leadership, as you mentioned, and bring the people who are in the communities doing the work in with you in these goals, which is what Michael's last research project was focused on in the RPC. So thank you for summarizing everything that we've wanted states like yours to do. And if you're listening to this webinar and you're interested in learning more about the work that is being done in Utah or Indiana or anywhere in the nation, don't hesitate to reach out to us or check out America Succeeds and specifically the research portion of that website. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.